landmark victory over Oklahoma and perhaps putting them in the mix eventually to be in the playoff discussion. Now, among one-loss teams, the team with the best chance of still making the playoff is Penn State. ESPN's playoff predictor still saying the Nittany Lions, despite the 1-point loss to Ohio State, 13% chance to make the playoff. Oklahoma, Washington, and Michigan all with a chance. Those numbers obviously would rise with great play the rest of the way. And there are several interesting teams on here, most notably because they're coming off that loss to Texas, I think is Oklahoma. Now, Sam Ehlinger got Oklahoma's defensive coordinator fired, Mike Stoops, and maybe a different voice changes the way the Sooners play defense, Joey. And if that's true, then maybe we're evaluating an Oklahoma defense in a different way than we are right now. So I wouldn't be so quick to write off any of these one-loss teams right now.
I agree with you, Reese. And I think sort of like the Notre Dame team, they bring in Ian Book, and all of a sudden they made us look again at their offense and be that much more impressed. So now you take Oklahoma, who's beaten by Texas. They fire their defense coordinator. They have a bye week. Now they have a chance to come back after the bye week and impress us and say, look, we fixed our problem. We're a better team. We've seen them look dynamic. We've seen what this offense can do. They have a chance at West Virginia later, and they'll have a chance to avenge their loss if both teams get to the Big 12 championship game. Oklahoma shouldn't panic at this point because, as you guys always say, there's going to be losses in these teams ahead of them. So if I'm Oklahoma, handle my business, play better defense, impress people, and then at the end, David Pollock will say, you guys deserve to be in.
And that's the biggest thing for me, Joey, is that they get a chance to redeem their loss. Now, listen, when you start looking at one-loss teams, obviously you're going to start pointing to who they lost to. How does Texas do the rest of the way? Do they come into that showdown with both one losses? Another great game down the stretch. Obviously, that's one of those things we'll look at. But the defense, they have to turn it around. They have to get better. But when you have a chance to make a statement and undo a loss at the end of the season, I think it gives you a lot. It will give you a lot of power in that room to say, okay, we've changed, we've turned things around, and they could be one of those one-loss teams. Because Washington loses, obviously, to Auburn. That's a worse loss. You're going to start comparing loss to loss, and they'll have a good chance.
And obviously, guys, the team that we didn't have on that list, and we were just sort of talking about them, that I think still has a chance to make it into the playoff is Texas, with that huge win against Oklahoma. And of course, everyone remembers a disappointing loss in week 1. But to me, they are a so much improved team from that week 1 game at Maryland. And you watch the way Sam Ehlinger's played, it's just been remarkable. And his ability in his second year as a true sophomore in this offense, feeling more comfortable, seeing defense, taking advantage of Colin Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey on the outside. I love Texas's defense and what defensive coordinator Todd Orlando has done. He does a great job mixing up the pressures and disguising it, and he can give people headaches. You know, I think back to Ohio State in 2014. Remember that week, that early season loss at home against Virginia Tech? They lost by 2 touchdowns, and all of a sudden they got better. They were noticeably improving as the season went on. I think that was something the committee really took account of. And I think you look down the road at Texas's schedule, if they win out, and let's just say they get an opportunity to play a one-loss Oklahoma with a Heisman candidate and Kyler Murray again and win that game, I think Texas is a tough team to leave out of the college football playoff.
I agree.
Yeah, guys, I think what's interesting about these teams is I'm big on looking at the quarterback play and who can put points up on the board. You start with Penn State, Trace McSorley. We know what they can do offensively and how they can look impressive doing what they need to do, not just winning games, but putting up style points, which is big when you get into latter part of October and into November. Texas, with the way Sam Ehlinger's playing and the confidence that they're creating is obvious. Kyler Murray at Oklahoma. You guys are talking about a bounce-back opportunity. Jake Browning, we keep, Washington a lot of times seems to be a forgotten team out on the West Coast, but they're going to have big opportunities starting this week at Autzen against the Oregon Ducks. So I find it interesting that all these teams that are trying to get back up all have quarterbacks that give them a chance, if they can get hot, to really put themselves in the best position. But I think Penn State, if you're to look at their schedule and look who they still have to play, and the opportunities to impress the committee will be there. And at the end of the day, I know we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but at the end of the day, if they were to run the table and beat teams like Michigan and Wisconsin and get out there at 11-1, and Ohio State were to win out and keep them out of Indianapolis in a Big Ten championship opportunity, it's funny that Penn State a couple years ago was on the outside looking in, even though they won the Big Ten championship. Could we be in a scenario now where they skip Indianapolis, but they're 11-1 with one loss, a 1-point loss to Ohio State, and the committee still would maybe look at them as a possibility of being in the top 4. So I think they have to, as we sit here right now, I think of those one-loss teams, they're kind of in the driver's seat.
Well, you've seen it happen the last couple of years, Herbie. You saw Alabama get in without going to their conference championship game, and then the year before that you referenced with Ohio State getting in rather than Penn State. What about Michigan's opportunity? I understand they've got to fix their issues in big games and rivalry games. It'll start this weekend, big game perspective against Wisconsin. But, I mean, Michigan probably next to Penn State couldn't have a better situation as a one-loss team, a one-touchdown loss on opening night on the road against a team that's sitting there in the top 5. What about Michigan's opportunity? What do you see from them, Herbie, in terms of their growth?
Well, we know their defense is because of the way Don Brown's playing and how they attack. They're going to keep them in every game that they play. We're all just waiting to see, again, Shea Patterson, the offensive line, continue to gel and continue to find an identity. I feel like in the last couple weeks, they're making great strides in that direction. I feel like Shea Patterson is getting more and more comfortable with his role in this offense. I think everybody expected him, because of how he looked at Ole Miss, to just, no problem, step into Ann Arbor and here we go. But as you guys all know, it's such a different system from what he ran in high school to what he did in Oxford to what he's doing now in Ann Arbor. And I think we've seen him grow. And I really think Tariq Black, I don't know the latest. I know it's hard to get any kind of information out of Ann Arbor on injuries.
Oh, really?
But if Tariq Black somehow shows up one of these weeks and they get him during the stretch run to go with Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones, they all of a sudden, with the tight end play, I'm with you, Reese. They have a great list of teams in front of them starting this weekend with Wisconsin. You can't forget about Michigan at all.
No, and we look at their defense, and obviously I think that's championship. You can point to that. Offensively, severe weaknesses. Let's be honest, too, guys. We do this every year, and we start talking about who's going to go undefeated, who's what, who's X. Let's see who develops and continues to grow. Because if Shea Patterson does get healthy, or does get hot, and starts to understand how to go to the football, he's starting to run the football more. They're starting to use him that way, and I think you saw it against Northwestern. They needed it. If they can get the offensive side of the football hot, absolutely they should be in this conversation. 1,000,000% to have to go on the road to start the season against a really good team, and that's your loss out of conference. Don't tell me about strength of schedule and playing people early in the season or playing out of conference. If it came down to that and they had run the table and they'd beat Penn State, Ohio State, all these teams, Wisconsin, all these teams that are so good in the Big Ten, absolutely 100% Michigan would be in that equation.